This is Apple playing defense and hoping nobody notices. They're panicked. The iPhone 18 is still half a year away, but the leaks are already telling us something far more interesting than what features are coming. They're telling us what Apple is afraid of. Because when you actually read between the lines of what's being rumored, you start to see a company that isn't confidently leading the industry forward. You see a company scrambling to catch up, plug holes, and desperately try to look like they're still the ones setting the pace. And the most telling sign, Apple isn't raising prices. According to Ming-Chi Kuo, one of the most accurate Apple analysts in the game, the entire iPhone 18 lineup is staying at current price points despite memory and storage costs absolutely skyrocketing across the industry. Now, on the surface, that sounds generous. Apple being consumer friendly, Apple eating the cost. But let's be real for a second. Apple has never been the "we'll take a hit so you don't have to" company. They're the company that sold you a $19 polishing cloth and a $700 set of wheels for a Mac Pro. So why the sudden generosity? The answer is uncomfortable if you're an Apple loyalist. They're losing ground. Samsung is absolutely eating their lunch in the foldable space. Google is winning the AI narrative, even if their hardware sales don't reflect it. And Apple knows that right now, the last thing they can afford is to give fence sitters another reason to look elsewhere. McRumors has been tracking this shift in their buyer sentiment threads. The number of people saying, "I'll wait and see," or "maybe I'll try Samsung," has quietly but steadily increased over the last two generations. So Apple is doing something they rarely do. They're sacrificing hardware margin to protect ecosystem lock-in because they know the real money isn't the phone anymore. It's the services, it's iCloud, it's Apple One. It's the fact that once you're in, leaving means losing your photos, your messages, your entire digital life. The phone is just the entry fee. And right now, Apple is terrified that entry fee is starting to feel too high. But let's talk about what they are charging you for, because the camera upgrades tell a completely different story about what Apple thinks of you as a customer. The iPhone 18 Pro is getting what sounds like a genuinely impressive piece of technology, a variable mechanical aperture on the main camera. For those who don't speak photography nerd, this basically means the lens can physically open and close like a human pupil. Wider in the dark to let in more light, smaller in bright conditions to sharpen everything up. And yes, this is technically impressive. Phone Arena covered it extensively, and the patent filings Apple submitted are genuinely innovative stuff. But here's the thing that nobody in the tech bubble is asking: why is Apple adding this now? Mechanical aperture is something DSLRs and mirrorless cameras have had for decades. Samsung's Galaxy S series has been doing variable aperture since the S9. That was 2018. We're talking 7 years ago. So either Apple just discovered this technology exists, or, and this is the more uncomfortable interpretation, they've been sitting on it, waiting until they absolutely needed it to differentiate. And that's the pattern that nobody wants to admit. Apple doesn't add features when they become possible. They add features when they become necessary for the narrative. When Samsung added variable aperture, tech Twitter laughed and called it a gimmick. When Apple does it 7 years later, it's revolutionary low-light photography. Do you see the game? The same feature framed completely differently based on who's releasing it. And the truly wild part is that this will absolutely work. The tech press will celebrate it. The YouTube reviewers will call it a game changer, and the silent majority, the millions of normal people who just want their photos to look nice, will buy the phone and never once think about aperture mechanics. They'll just know their night photos look better, and that's enough. That's always been enough for Apple. Speaking of things Apple is finally getting around to, the selfie camera is jumping from 12 megapixels to 24, and I know what the spec-obsessed crowd is thinking. Finally, Apple catches up to Android. But let me offer a different interpretation. This isn't Apple catching up. This is Apple acknowledging something they've pretended wasn't a problem for 3 generations. Their selfie camera was genuinely behind the competition, and it was starting to embarrass them. Forbes ran a piece last year about how Gen Z buyers increasingly prioritize front-facing camera quality over rear cameras because, and this is the part that makes old school tech enthusiasts cringe. The primary use case for cameras on phones isn't photography anymore. It's content creation. It's TikTok. It's Instagram stories. It's FaceTime with grandma. The rear camera system on iPhones has been industry leading for years, but the front-facing camera has been coasting on brand loyalty alone. But the camera situation leads us to something far more revealing about Apple's internal psychology: the camera control button situation. If you bought an iPhone 16 Pro, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That little button on the side that's supposed to make launching the camera faster, but mostly makes you accidentally change your exposure while trying to take a simple photo. Well, according to the leaks, Apple is simplifying this feature by disabling the swipe gestures and keeping only the click function. And look, I'm going to be honest with you, I turned that feature off within a week of getting my phone. It drove me insane. Every time I handed my phone to someone to take a photo of me, they'd accidentally swipe it, and suddenly my picture looked like it was taken through a dirty window. But here's what's actually interesting about this simplification. It's an admission. Apple publicly loudly launched this camera control button as a flagship feature. They put it in every commercial. Every reviewer had to talk about it. And less than 2 generations later, they're already walking it back. That's not confidence. That's, we tried something, it didn't work, and now we're quietly fixing it while hoping everyone forgets we made a big deal about it in the first place. This is the corporate version of I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed in myself. And it's fascinating because Apple rarely does this. Usually when Apple commits to a feature, they commit. They'll defend the notch for years. They'll act like removing the headphone jack was brave, but the camera control button, they're abandoning ship fast. And the reason is simple. Normal users hated it. Not tech Twitter, not Reddit power users. Normal people who just wanted to take a photo without accidentally activating a feature they didn't ask for. This is one of those rare moments where the silent majority actually forced Apple's hand. Now, let's talk about something that sounds like science fiction, but is actually Apple playing 4D chess against the telecom industry. The rumor is that Apple is partnering with SpaceX for actual 5G satellite internet, not just emergency texting, but full-on data connectivity from space. And when I first read this, my reaction was the same as everyone else's. Wait, what? Because this sounds like Apple is suddenly trying to become a carrier, but think about it from Apple's perspective for a second. They've spent the last decade trying to reduce their dependence on every partner who has leverage over them. They replaced Intel with their own chips. They're building their own modems to replace Qualcomm. The C2 modem is rumored to finally hit with the iPhone 18 line, and it's going to be a huge deal for efficiency. They want to own every piece of the stack that matters, and the one thing they still don't control, the network. SpaceX represents something tantalizing, a way to potentially bypass carriers entirely. Now, is the iPhone 18 going to let you ditch your cell plan and just use satellite? Of course not. The infrastructure isn't there yet. But this is classic Apple. They start with something small, something that seems like a niche feature for hikers and emergencies, and then slowly, generation by generation, they expand it until suddenly you realize they've built an alternative to the entire cellular industry. McRumors has been tracking Apple's satellite ambitions since the iPhone 14, and the trajectory is clear. Emergency texting became roadside assistance, became satellite messaging. Full data connectivity is the obvious next step. And if you're Verizon or AT&T, this should terrify you, because the company that makes the most popular phone in America is quietly building the infrastructure to make you obsolete. But not everything Apple is doing with the iPhone 18 is this grand strategic play. Some of it is pure, unfiltered vanity. The dynamic island is getting smaller. That's the headline. Apple is finally moving toward under-display Face ID technology, which means the pill-shaped cutout that everyone either loves or tolerates is shrinking. And tech Twitter is already celebrating that finally more screen real estate. But let's be incredibly honest with each other. Did the current dynamic island size actually bother you? Did you ever look at your phone and think, I would enjoy this content so much more if that black bar was 15% smaller? Because I'm willing to bet that for 95% of iPhone users, the answer is a resounding, I never thought about it until you just mentioned it. This is one of those upgrades that exists entirely for the spec sheet. It exists so that when you walk into an Apple store and see the iPhone 18 next to the iPhone 17, you can physically see a difference. It's the same reason the iPhone 13 Pro had a smaller notch than the iPhone 12 Pro, not because users were demanding it, but because Apple needed a visual way to say, this is the new one. And that's the thing that's fascinating about Apple's design philosophy right now. According to the leaks, the iPhone 18 isn't getting any major physical redesign. The camera layout stays the same. The overall form factor stays the same. The most significant external change might be better color matching between the back glass and the aluminum frame. That's it. That's the design innovation. Now, Phone Arena and other outlets have covered this, and the general response has been, well, internally, it's a huge upgrade. And that's true. The A20 Pro chip is going to be a monster. But here's what that reveals. Apple has run out of ways to make the iPhone look different. They've optimized every millimeter. They've refined every curve. And now they're in the same position that watch companies are in. And you can only change the shape so much before it stops being a watch. But there is one area where Apple might actually swing for the fences, and it's the product that terrifies me the most as someone who follows this industry, the foldable iPhone, the iPhone Ultra, whatever they end up calling it. The leaks suggest we might finally see Apple's entry into the foldable market, and the battery specs are genuinely wild. 5,800 milliamp hours. For context, the Galaxy Z Fold 7, Samsung's flagship foldable, has a 4,400 milliamps battery. The Pixel 9 Pro Fold has around 5,150 milliamps. Apple coming in at 5,800 would be absolute domination on the battery front. And Max Tech has done extensive analysis on this because battery life has traditionally been the Achilles heel of foldables. You've got two screens to power, more surface area, more drain. But if Apple can deliver genuine all-day battery in a foldable form factor, that changes the conversation entirely. But here's the part that nobody in the tech bubble is talking about. Apple isn't entering the foldable market because they want to. They're entering it because Samsung forced their hand. For years, Apple could ignore foldables. They could dismiss them as niche, fragile, compromised. But Samsung has sold foldables to enough people and made them good enough that Apple doesn't have a foldable is starting to become a genuine purchase consideration. Not for everyone, not even for most people, but for enough of the high-end early adopter, I want the most advanced technology crowd that Apple cares about. And Apple's entry into this market is going to be fascinating to watch because they're going to do what they always do, take something that already exists, execute it better than anyone else, and then pretend they invented it. And finally, let's talk about the thing that matters more than any spec, the signal Apple sends with its exclusive colors. For the iPhone 18 Pro, the rumor is we're getting one of three options: burgundy, coffee brown, or purple. And I know this sounds trivial, but stay with me here because color choices are actually one of the most psychologically calculated decisions Apple makes every year. Think about it. When you see someone with a distinctive iPhone color, you immediately know which generation they have. That person with the deep purple iPhone 14 Pro, you know exactly when they bought their phone. That person with the natural titanium iPhone 16 Pro, same thing. Colors are Apple's way of making each generation visually identifiable without changing the fundamental design. It's why they retire colors and introduce new ones, not because they ran out of the old paint, but because they need you to feel like your current phone is last year's model. Coffee brown is particularly interesting as a potential choice because it's risky. It's not a typical premium color, it's earthy, warm, slightly unexpected. And if Apple goes with it, it tells you something about their confidence level. They're comfortable enough to take a swing, they're not playing it safe. Burgundy, on the other hand, is pure luxury signaling. It's the color of expensive wine, premium leather, old money aesthetics. Purple splits the difference. Bold, but not unprecedented. Whichever they choose, the strategy is the same. Give people a reason to feel like the iPhone 18 is distinct, even when everything else about it is iterative, because at the end of the day, Apple knows that most people upgrade for emotional reasons, not rational ones. They don't upgrade because the chip is 15% faster. They upgrade because they want something that feels new, and a new color is the cheapest, easiest way to manufacture that feeling. So, what's the actual takeaway from all of this? The iPhone 18 is shaping up to be a solid phone. It'll have better cameras, better battery, a faster chip, maybe a smaller camera cutout. These are all good things. But if you've been paying attention to the pattern, you'll notice what's missing. There's no one more thing. There's no paradigm shift. There's no moment where you look at it and think, I've never seen anything like this before. And maybe that's fine. Maybe the smartphone era of revolutionary annual updates is genuinely over. Maybe we're in the refinement phase now, where every year is slightly better, but nothing is dramatically different. Or maybe, and this is the interpretation that should worry Apple, they've become so dominant, so comfortable that they've forgotten how to take the risks that made them great in the first place. Because here's what nobody in the tech press will say out loud. Samsung is pushing harder than Apple right now. Google is swinging for the fences more aggressively. Apple is playing it safe, collecting their services revenue, and hoping that good enough continues to be good enough. And historically, that strategy works until it doesn't. Just ask BlackBerry, just ask Nokia, just ask any company that confused market dominance with permanent relevance. The iPhone 18 will sell millions. It'll get great reviews. It'll be the phone that most people buy if they're in the market for a premium smartphone. But the leaks tell a story of a company that's playing defense more than offense, a company responding to competitors rather than forcing competitors to respond to them, a company that's very, very good at making phones, but maybe starting to forget what it felt like to be the company that made everyone else chase them. And that more than any spec or feature is the story worth watching. Not the megapixels, not the aperture, not the satellite connectivity. The question of whether Apple still has the hunger to lead, or whether they've become the thing they spent decades mocking, a company that's winning and knows it. See you next one. Peace out.